Luke chapter 19. Apparently the big man is about to preach about a little man, according to John. Luke chapter 19. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could never see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." I wonder if you want to just take the peak of my mic off, because it's just ringing back in my ear. I don't know if anybody else is getting that. It's really exciting to be here today. It's really actually very unusual for me to be invited to a baptismal service. It's not common to have a guest speaker, and I was so excited to hear that that's what I was coming to today, because baptismal services are key moments for every single person who comes into the room to witness them. And that gets me excited. It's a day that will never, ever be forgotten by Adam and Cindy and by Peter. It's going to be a fantastic day for them, but it's a fantastic day for all of us as well. This is a day that could change your life. This is a day that could be full of significance for you, whether this is the first time you've ever seen one of these baptisms or it's the 100th time. And I want to just take a few moments to explain why baptism, this rather unusual and strange act in modern society, is a moment of great hope for the whole universe, starting with us. This is a moment full of anticipation, a moment of hope, a moment of possibility, a moment of intention, a moment of transformation that goes far beyond these walls and can expand out to the far reaches of this world that we live in. Have you ever pondered the question, what is stopping this world from getting better? Or you might put it this way, why does progress not lead to progress? Martin Luther King was assassinated 50 years ago this month with a dream. And yes, progress has been made in the States and all around the world, but the inequality of the world is greater today than it was then. And it's still very much marked by color. We've even seen it this week in our own society, in our own nation, with the whole Windrush travesty. It's not gone away. The world has not got better. Why have we not become more loving? Why have we not become more kind? Why have we not become more compassionate? Philip Hanlon, who's a professor in public health at Glasgow University, wrote some years ago about a coming epidemic in Scotland. A public health officer speaking of a coming epidemic. I wondered what it might be that he was thinking of. Diabetes, cancer, heart disease, stroke? No, it was loneliness. Loneliness was the epidemic he was speaking about. Right now, the Scottish Government has a consultation out on isolation and loneliness in Bearsden, and in Glasgow, and in Edinburgh, and in Shetland, and every part of this nation. Can you imagine that? We have broadband, We've got mobile phones. I can talk to my son's girlfriend in Australia face to face. She can listen into this sermon as it's happening live if we so decide to do it. And then, yet you have neighbors who have spoken to no one this week. You have neighbors that have never physically touched anybody for a month. There is a huge epidemic of isolation. Many of them are hoping that the supermarket does not turn to fully automated cash outs, because it means at least once a day they can go to the supermarket and talk to somebody and have contact with somebody who's living. Why does progress not lead to progress? As a kid, I got bullied at school quite a bit. But you know, there was one good thing. I could go home and get relief. Not today. If you're bullied as a kid at school and you go home, it continues online. The pressure never lets up. We used to drink water out of wells in Scotland. In fact, in some parts we still do. Normally piped into the house. But progress means we can drink out of convenient plastic drinks bottles. It's progress, but at what cost? I look at the pictures that you've seen on your television screens recently of our oceans. We used to walk a lot. We used to share transport with others on buses and trams, and now we just jump into our cars, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the driveway sometimes. It's progress, but at what cost? At what cost to the environment? At what cost to the climate? At what cost to those people who, through the warming temperatures of the sea and the rising levels of the sea, are now losing their homes because we have 4 in the driveway? Why does progress not lead to progress? And what on earth has this got to do with baptism? Well, today's baptism points to a different way of seeing the world, a different way of understanding progress, a different way of determining goodness and pleasure and community and love. It even changes the way we answer the question, who is our neighbor? In this act of baptism, Adam and Cindy and Peter will recognize that the chief issue with why progress does not lead to progress is something to do with them. Today's baptism will point to a way of seeing the world that turns the world the right way up, where the last will be first, where the broken will be healed, where the oppressed will find justice, where the lonely will find community, where those pushed down will be raised up, where long-term cycles of abuse will be broken, where the enslaved will find freedom, where the guilty and those who feel shame will find freedom from it. And they'll come to discover fullness of life, because baptism signifies an individual surrender to selfishness. They will declare before you today that the most selfless person that ever lived and even died selflessly is now their Lord, their Master, the one who will guide and direct their life as they seek to follow his example. That's why baptism has the potential to change the world, one life at a time. It allows us to live selflessly. In my understanding, drawn from experience and from the Bible's kind of grand story, the reason progress does not lead to progress is found in me. And it's found in you. And that natural sense of selfishness or self-preservation or self-gratification that controls our life. I ask questions like, why doesn't the life-saving cancer drugs that are available to us not reach people in the third world? And I realize it's my pension fund that's the problem. You see, I want a good return on it. And if we give it to them for nothing or cheap, I don't get a good return on my pension fund. I ask questions like, why have I stopped visiting the elderly in my neighborhood who are often isolated? To sit down and play a hand of cards with them for half an hour, or to do their garden for them, or do a bit of shopping and just help them unpack it into their cupboards. And the answer is, I'm busy pursuing my own dreams. I'm busy pursuing the dreams of my family and my kids. And so I end up with not enough energy or time for my neighbors. Thankfully, we're now starting to think about the impact of our lifestyles on our environment and the way we drink our coffee and our carbon footprint. But most of life doesn't encourage us to think that way. Advertising tells us to just do it, to indulge ourselves because we're worth it. The pressure of our peers is to conform at various stages of life. I really worry for young parents. The pressure to make sure their kids get every opportunity in life. And when we say every, we mean every opportunity in life. But today's baptism points to another way of looking at the world. With Jesus as Lord, our neighborhood becomes the whole cosmos. Our brothers and sisters live at the other side of the world as well as the other side of the road. With Jesus as Lord, we make a choice to notice selfishness. We make a choice to notice the my way culture and to resist it. But that resistance, to be honest, is quite futile without a living encounter with Jesus. Humanitarians try hard. Some, quite frankly, are amazing. But the vast majority end up, like the rest of us, drawn along with the crowd of public opinion. Judging comes more natural than welcoming. Caution reigns more than being generous. We settle for compassion rather than love. We lack the power to change ourselves. That's why I read the story I read earlier. I wonder if you can imagine the backstory to that story. Zach was small. He always had been. Like my youngest son, he was probably called midget at school. It happens when you're 4'8" and your big brother's 6'3". Midget, titsy, tiny. Even well-meaning grandparents, while patting him on the head, would say things like, "Well, I think you're getting bigger." Just reinforced the smallness compared to the average kid. Zach, I'm sure, tried acting bigger with the big kids. Tried standing up to them just to be squashed down further. Probably tried to get noticed by the girls, but what girl wants to look like a giant when she's walking arm in arm with this small fry? Through childhood, he develops a resilience, maybe a bitterness, maybe a defiance. One day I'm going to be bigger than you guys. Struggles to get a job, but eventually he gets one. It's at the bottom of the rung, working for other marginalized people. That's where he made his so-called friends. Among the unloved, among the other disliked groups. His determination, developed in childhood, gets him to push on until he is the boss of the marginalized people. He's the top dog amongst the most disliked people in the community, and it has made him rich. And yes, he's getting his own back, exploiting those who used to get at him when he was little at school. He was Mr. Big when it came to cash now. That was until the day he encounters Jesus. It was only an hour or so Jesus was passing through. But Jesus wanted to connect with him face to face, for real. He didn't care about the outward appearance, either the height or the bravado. He was just interested in the real guy. He wanted a chance to get to know this Zach. And in that hour or two, his life was changed. The bitterness, the anger, those years were dealt with. And a new intention came into his life. A generosity to the poor. A generosity of restitution for those who he had defrauded that marked the rest of his life. He had encountered the living Jesus and discovered the power of forgiveness for his past and discovered a new way to live for the future. A power to live differently from how he had turned out before. And in today's baptism, we will witness those who've come into a deep personal engagement with Jesus. As real as that engagement that Zacchaeus had all those years ago, as transformative potentially as that engagement years before. You see, baptism is not a symbol of the process of transformation being complete. These guys won't be perfect. But it is a symbol of that transformation beginning. It is a symbol of the intention of them to give themselves over to the person of Jesus Christ. It is a sign that there is an intention to allow the living Jesus, his teaching, his example, and their own living encounters with him up to this point and from now on to shape the way that they live, to redirect their lives, to heal their past, to forgive their failings, and to set out in a better way of living and to give them the power to do so. And that fills me with hope. That fills me with hope. But of course, baptism itself doesn't have the power to do that. Baptism is really a story for us. It's an illustrative story for us to see and imagine and understand. It invites us to witness a transforming story unfolding in the life of Adam and Cindy and Peter. Their baptism communicates a story for us to ponder, for us to remember, for us to reflect upon. For many in our society today, faith is fine as long as you keep it private. Keep it within your own house. For goodness sake, don't start talking about faith in the workplace. Don't start talking about faith at school or in the pub or in the club or in the street. Maintain it within your home, within your churches. That's okay. But the Christian faith is kind of powerless if it stays inside one person. It's quite pointless if the whole world is left unaffected by such transformation. In baptism, the story of faith is communicated to everyone who witnesses it. That's why I said at the beginning, it would transform each and every one of us as we sit here and as we watch Adam and Cindy and Peter. As we watch them walk down into this tank of water, we will witness their faith in a living encounter with Jesus as they are plunged under that water. As it flows over their entire body, we will see with our eyes what they've experienced in their life. We'll see that washing, that cleansing, that refreshing being acted out. In their experience with Jesus, just like that with Zach, their past has been dealt with. They've been given a new start. They've been given a clean beginning. And we'll see that. And as they're dipped down, and they'll go right down if you've never seen it before, as they're dipped down, they'll disappear out your sight. It's almost like they're diving into a grave. And we'll be reminded that just as Christ died, they're also dying today. They're dying to their self. They're dying to that selfishness that holds the world back. But they don't end up down there. At least we hope they don't. I've seen it before. In the sea. but they'll be raised back up. And when they're raised back up, we'll be reminded that Jesus was raised back from death to life. But it's not the life that they died to, it's a new life. Empowered by that encounter with Jesus, they'll rise out of that water, seeking to be new people, seeking to live with their new master. You can try and ignore what you see today. You can say to yourself, I'm going to forget about that, and maybe it will go away even by the end of the service. That's one way of dealing with what you see. For those of you who have been baptized before, you can look at it and then you'll notice it resonates. It maybe reminds you of the time you were baptized yourself. And you'll think of your own intentions way back then, 5 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever it is for you. And say, am I living out those intentions today? Am I remembering the power that's available for me to live? And maybe for some of you, you'll find yourself thinking, I wonder what that transformation might look like in my life. I wonder what my life might look like if I were to surrender this self stuff. Maybe you'll recognize as you watch them get baptized the need for a living encounter with Jesus to deal with the stuff in your past and to change your future. You're maybe thinking, well, I could never live the way that you're talking about, Alan. Well, you're right, you couldn't. Neither could Zacchaeus. Neither could either of these guys. Their ability to live differently, it comes through that encounter with Jesus. You might say, Alan, that's going to cost me a lot of stuff to live like that. Well, you're absolutely right. It is. It will cost you everything. But it will be worth it. Because it will change who you are. And it will change the lives of those around you. And it will indeed even change this entire cosmos. So let's hear the stories. Not my story, not Zach's story from 2,000 years ago, but let's hear Adam and Cindy and Peter's story. And let's experience that step of commitment as they walk down into this tank of water and are baptized. And once you've experienced that, if you want to talk some more, I'll gladly spend all day talking about what a face-to-face encounter with Jesus looks like.